All right, so attempt to put together a first episode of a podcast that talks a bit about how to live better. And that won't be limited to any particular subject, but it could be focused on things like health and mental well-being, things like meditation, how to look after yourself, taking care of your appearance,
So a holistic approach to
just
a
kind of
whole
a holistic.
bodily.
I mean, since we're both guys, we'll probably talk from a guy's point of view, right?
I guess we will. Yeah. Yeah.
But tricks and tips that we've amassed in near enough 100 years of collective experience. Yeah.
All right.
So I thought we'd talk a little bit about ketogenic diet today because
So I know nothing about this. This is something you brought to me. I've never heard of the ketogenic diet.
yeah.
So I'm intrigued to learn some more. What have you got?
Well, I guess the first thing I learned happened years ago when I first heard about and read about a diet called the Atkins diet.
Oh yeah.
And it was premised on the concept that your body can actually behave and feel better once you switch from burning sugar as your primary fuel source to fat. And so he sort of took it some way along this course of reducing carbohydrates in general, particularly.
Wasn't that meat only? You just ate meat.
Well, no, I
For-
think it was more of a reduce your carbohydrate intake substantially,
Right.
and increase both protein and fat to compensate.
Okay.
And one of the hallmarks of this diet, as I remember, was a period where you had to sort of acclimatize your body to that new regime,
Yeah.
because your body would quickly run out of the carbohydrates and start looking for them. And when it didn't find them, it would start to switch on the systems, the backup systems, or in his view, the primary systems that would mobilize your adipose or stored fat
Right.
as an energy source, because that's what it's there for. Your body can only store, I believe, between 800 and 1,000 calories in carbohydrate form, or glycogen,
Yep.
or glycogen rather. But there are literally hundreds of thousands of calories of fat available to you. So if you were ever in a situation where you couldn't eat at all, if you were fat adapted, it's called, you could literally just, as long as you got liquid, moisture, water, you could live as long as your fat lasted. So anyway, obviously a very extreme example, but I think the concept is that your body is geared towards using that stored fat, whereas the carbohydrate cycle is geared towards storing more fat.
Right.
And so what happens in modern life, where you don't have the physical activity that you might have had you'd been a member of a tribe 250,000 years ago,
Yep.
you don't really access that properly, and your carbs, rather than being a quick source of almost like a buffer for activity that has to be done in intense spurts, like running from a saber-toothed tiger or whatever, ends up fooling itself into thinking that you're running out of food all the time and throwing it on your waist instead of using it.
Gotcha.
And that's where insulin and type 2 diabetes can develop, and that sort of vicious cycle of riding the carb roller coaster, I call it, where you have kind of a brain doldrum,
Yeah.
I suppose, and then you sort of feel like you need some sugar to pick me up, or a Red Bull or whatever you're using, and that works for a while, and then the insulin kicks in, and the rest of it that you didn't burn immediately goes on your hips. So,
Right. So you have this
anyway,
peak and trough as well with.
you have a peak and trough, so you're not in a smooth, steady
Yeah.
state. So it's one of the analogies I'd heard that I thought made sense was it's kind of like throwing a handful of pine kindling on a fire. It burns hot and really fast, then it's gone really fast as well. whereas the ketogenic, or using ketones for energy instead of sugar, is more like getting a log started and letting it burn. Pretty much the same heat output for the long term.
Okay.
So anyway, that's really been interesting to me for a while, and it's kind of evolved, not only in my own mind but in the market of ideas, to this more strict, I suppose, in the context of carbohydrate control, diet called ketogenic diet. So there was Atkins, and then there was this sort of paleo, and there still is, Paleolithic diet, premised on the concept that if we model our modern diet after the diet of hunter-gatherers in our ancestry, we will be more in tune with our genetic profile than eating grains and various other materials that we've only grown in the last 8,000 to 10,000 years.
Right.
Whereas that genetic training happened over millions of years. So that if you don't swim against the current, so to speak, that your body will find its natural energy level.
Yep.
Your mind will be clearer. You'll have less problems with your weight, and you'll have plenty of energy on tap for whatever you decide to do. So I've kind of taken that on, and just in the last, what's today, 18th? Just in the last, say, 3 weeks, I've been really strict with it. No alcohol. Not that you can't have alcohol on this diet. I just decided to have a dry month in January, but trying to keep the fat ratio at about 75% of my diet, which is harder than it sounds, believe it or not, because you can eat only so much butter and avocados and almonds before you have to start being creative about things. And then the other remaining 25% is spread at 20% protein and 5% carbs. Now,
so what's the principle? What's the principle that you have to follow to be in line with this diet?
Well, I think that the thing is, at first you have to just cut your carbohydrate intake way down. So,
is there a ratio you need to follow, or is there a preset?
I think everyone says that you should definitely stay below 50 grams of carbs a day to maintain what's called fat adaptation or adaptation, where you're actually burning fat and it doesn't kick you back into the easy sugar cycle.
Okay.
So you sort of put yourself through this period of conversion where your body's converting over, and it does that by recognizing that, hey, I'm not getting any more starch and potatoes and pasta and whatnot, so I better turn on plan B. So your body, over a period of time, and it's not very long, it's probably a week to 10 days depending on individual physiology, but your body throws all the switches it needs to start mobilizing those fat molecules into your metabolism, using the mitochondrial DNA to generate energy for your muscles and etc. So by taking the carbs away, it senses that it's going to need to do that, and that period of time takes a bit of time because it's not instant. It doesn't put you into ketosis right away.
Sure.
You'll notice it very low level, like 0.3, 0.5 millimolar per liter, and then if you test your blood or have it tested, you'll see yourself moving up. So the wisdom is that you try to get that ketosis, or the number of ketones per millimole of liter of blood, in 1.5 to 3 range.
And do you test your blood?
Yeah, I do. I have a little blood tester with these strips and the little finger pokers, and you just get a little drop of blood and stick the strip, and it absorbs it down the capillary, and then beeps and says, I mean, the device didn't cost that much at all. It's the strips it costs. They work out to about 80 pence or 90 pence each.
Is that a daily test?
I've been doing it daily, mostly because I'm in a fairly new phase of it myself, trying to understand how my body reacts to certain things and which parts of the day I'm more likely to be in ketosis or not. So in the morning, for example, when I get up, I'll run one just to baseline it and see.
Wow.
And what that generally reflects is what you ate for dinner,
Right.
if that makes sense. So if you ate dinner at say 7 o'clock and then you went to bed at 10, your body's still processing that food, and depending on what the nature of that food was, it'll settle you out at a certain level of ketones. And so I've been, in the last 10 days or so, I've been waking up in ketosis, which is a good thing, which means my body's moving closer and closer to that, staying in that range of 1.5 to 3. And I'm, I can do a little, like I have at night for dessert, rather than eating cake or pie or whatever, I have a couple of squares of 85 to 100% cocoa chocolate. And obviously there's some sugar, some carbs in there, but the cocoa has some really good things in it for your body, resveratrol and all the other things, anti-aging, and quite satisfying from a dessert point of view. And I guess I've developed a taste for it now, where I actually quite like it not to have a lot of sugar in it, or not be milk chocolate. So anyway, in terms of other behavior that I have been practicing in conjunction with the diet itself, I walk my dog daily. I've been a bit more religious about it since Christmas, making sure that we get out there, rain or shine, every day and do this one trail we have. It's 5 kilometers out and back. And so I believe that that level of energy, even though it's not like running or lifting weights or anything, it's enough to get my body mobilized, and therefore when I test after I get back from that activity, it's jumped up a good bit over where it was in the morning level. Okay. Another thing I do, and I realize I've kind of cobbled together several strategies around this, because there's all sorts of thought leaders in this space, but people like Tim Ferriss, Mark Sisson from Mark's Daily Apple. He's started out more of a paleo, and now he's kind of gotten a bit more focused on ketogenic. Tim Ferriss, the 4-hour work week, 4-hour body, really amazing guy. I mean, he's done a lot of body hacking, if you will, over the years, where he's tested himself. He's gone so far as to...
What's body hacking?
Body hacking is where you basically try to get some feedback from, more readily get feedback on the things you're doing with your body, so that you can see how your body reacts and you can react accordingly. For example, understanding how certain types of food affect your glucose levels. And Tim went so far as, back in the day, and I think he's probably mellowed out a bit like most of us now, he had a doctor put in a Bluetooth glucometer in the fat of his waist that could communicate with his smart device, and so he could take a bite of pasta and within a minute or so see how that had spiked his glucose. So he was really serious about it. And in the 4-hour body, you can learn a lot about that. We'll link some of these things I'm mentioning, like the tester, in this in the show notes, to allow you to find more about it. But anyway, he kind of pushed the science a lot, and he kind of brought together a lot of experts who had been researching things at a physiological or biochemical level, molecular biologists and others who had been looking at different parts of this ketosis cycle and how it had been effective, for example, in treating certain diseases like epilepsy and even Alzheimer's.
Right.
And that has been a very interesting thing for me to do now that I'm kind of interested in the whole lifestyle around it. But anyway, to get back to the diet and what does it mean and how does it make you live your life? Well, a lot of the things that are allowed in the context of having a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carb diet are things I like anyway. So I'm able to eat, meats and bacon and burgers without the bun and omelets with cheese and just about anything I would like anyway. As long as you don't throw those carbs in there and get your body confused about what it should be burning for the fuel, it will take that fat and put it in the system, and it gets processed for energy, which, as I understand it, and I'm certainly no molecular biologist, but I believe that the brain can use as energy either glycogen from the sugar or ketones, and that ketones are a cleaner burning fuel.
Okay. So they're selected first.
So for the brain. So
right.
I think the brain prefers it, and I know in my own experience, I feel sharper and more alert all day without having these peaks and valleys of where I need a nap or I feel like I need some sugar or something.
So here's the thing. So you've been on it for 3 weeks?
3 weeks.
And lost about a stone.
About a stone, which is 14 pounds to you non-English UK people.
So a lot of that's, we know, water retention, which is gone. But then when you get down to your goal, I don't know what your target goal is, but when you get to there, what happens to the process? I mean, you don't want to keep losing weight, so is there a way of stabilizing your platform? Or
that's a great question. I think the calorie math, which as I understand it hasn't really changed, is that a pound of body weight is 3,500 calories.
Okay.
So once you've kind of eliminated the excess water that your body is carrying, and I know that sounds weird because you're used to thinking that you drink all the water you want. Water is great for you. There's no such thing as excess water. But there is in this sense, because the only reason that excess water is being carried is to help in the metabolization of the carbohydrates.
Right.
It's not needed for the ketogenic cycle.
Right.
So your body naturally says, look, I'm not carrying this around for no reason, and sheds it. And so that's why you'll have some very positive reinforcing quick losses, which makes people think, Jesus, this is a miracle.
Yeah.
I want to waste away to nothing in 2 days. But once that kind of stabilizes, you'll see much more realistic gains based on the differential between your basal metabolism rate and what number of calories your body burns just to keep all the systems running, your heart beating and your, that sort of thing, plus the additional calories you use for activity. So I've got a watch that helps me track how far I walked and my pulse and all this other stuff, and it translates that roughly into an amount of calories, which you add to your BMI, your basal metabolism rate. And that's how much you can eat to stay the same. Okay. And if you fall below that, it starts whittling away toward a 3,500, which will drop you another pound. And so that's kind of how you control it. So
I always thought that it's a perfectly, a fairly simple, if you're rational about this, that to lose weight, simply burn more calories than you take in.
Yeah.
But I'm told by people in the know that that's not the case. There are people who, it doesn't matter what they do, they just can't shed the excess weight. They can't get in condition. Why and how? I don't understand.
Well, I think there's another dimension to this, which is based on the composition of those calories. In other words, how calories as a number is one thing, but the macros, it's called, which is the macro constituents of those calories, which in this case are really just fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. If that mix is not right, your body is confused. Let's say you eat a pizza with a lot of cheese and meats and toppings on it, which all are legal on the ketogenic diet, but then you eat it with a big, piece of bread under it, which your body's going to let jump the queue to get more readily the carbs out of the sugar because it's more easily metabolized. So your body then needs to take on some extra water to metabolize the carbs.
Gotcha.
So then you're going to look like you gained weight the next morning when you weigh yourself because it's pulled in that water from the water you drink or the beers you were drinking with it or whatever, but it holds it. Okay. And then when that's burned up, it doesn't immediately switch back to burning the fat because it's a big process to switch over. So your body kind of starts to ask you, hey, I need some more carbs here. Right. And that's when you go through that sort of suffering phase when you're really craving stuff and you really need to get it in your body. And if you don't ride that out and let it switch properly back into the fat burning mode, you'll be on that roller coaster forever. But it's that water that comes back that makes you think, I ran 2 miles yesterday or 3 miles, had 2 slices of pizza, and dang, if I didn't gain 2 pounds.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how I understand it. I'm sure that the scientists out there and doctors can explain it in much more technical terms, but at least that's the assumption that I've been operating under, and it so far has served me well.
Okay.
So yeah, and then once you kind of get used to it, there are some other strategies. I mean, there's things that I like that are obviously carb based. I mean, I like well-made bread. I like pasta. I like all the same things that I used to like. But I've found things that now I can use instead of that to give me the same sort of textural and aesthetic feedback, I suppose. For example, I found this really good recipe for ketogenic mac and cheese, and instead of using the macaroni and cheese or the traditional wheat-based part of it, you take cauliflower and you kind of take it apart down to the little floret level, and you get like a whole head of cauliflower, and then you get some strips of bacon, and you chop the bacon up and you put it in a cast iron skillet, and you render that a bit and let it cook. And you throw some garlic and some onion in there, and then you throw the cauliflower in and you let it cook with that bacon fat and whatnot, and it cooks for a while. And what that does, and this is a really cool trick, because I've always liked cauliflower, but I've always hated the fact that it gets watery when you bake it and put it in the oven. So if you cook it on the stove first in the skillet, all that water evaporates out of it, and it kind of makes it more stable.
Okay.
So then the next step is you get your casserole pan, 9 by 12 or 9 by 9, whatever you want. I can link the recipe as well in the show notes. And you sort of put some ghee or coconut oil, some sort of high-fat, non-sticky material around there, and then you put the cauliflower and the bacon and the onion and all that other stuff, and you smooth it out, and then you put a layer of cheese, grated cheese, on top of it. And I went crazy with the cheese. I put like almost a whole, because I was feeding more than myself, so I had guests over that night. I was going to try to convince them that it's painless to be on this diet. It's painless to be on a ketogenic diet. You don't even notice. So anyway, I put a bunch of cheese on there, put some Parmesan, and then I topped it off. I bought a pack of pork rinds and crunched them up with a mortar and pestle and made this kind of crunchy pork thing and topped that on there. And then I put it in the oven and baked it for, I don't know, about 15 minutes.
Sounds good.
And my wife, she's a bit reticent to get on this because she doesn't want to give up her cupcakes. And
well, she also doesn't need to lose weight.
Sweetie, she doesn't need to lose weight, so she's happy with where she is.
Having said that, I think part of this is that it's not just a weight loss thing.
That's
it's actually this holistic feel better.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't need to lose weight, it's going to benefit you, right?
Agreed. And I think kind of the elephant in the room that we as a society have to deal with is type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
And it's become an epidemic in America for sure, and also in the UK.
Yeah.
And it comes along with that obesity, that carb cycle that kind of is a roller coaster you can never get off of unless you do it the hard way.
Yeah.
And it's therapeutic in that respect. I mean, it's used as a treatment, an actual medical allopathic treatment for people who have epileptic seizures, because the brain getting agitated and hyperactive under the sugar influence is what causes a lot of these seizures. And whereas this ketone diet actually makes it a much more smooth and unspiky process, and therefore can often be effectively used to treat that.
And is there documented evidence for all this? That
I've got a lot of materials I can put in our notes so that people can read for themselves. And like I said, these come from people a lot more qualified to talk about these things than I am around the science and the physiology about it. But it's
okay.
It's something I'm happy with. I'm going to stick with it. I think I'm about halfway to my goal. I've lost, like I say, about a stone, and I know that sounds unhealthy to lose a stone in 21 days, but like I said, a lot of that was the initial water loss. And then now when I go weigh, yesterday I was the same as the day before, no change. The day before that I went up a pound, And today I dropped 1.8 pounds. So it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
You sort of slowly see the graph going down. And then when you get to your target weight, your playing weight, and I think your body naturally knows when it gets there. You may have a mental image of how you want to look, or maybe a weight that you remember from your youth, which is what my personal case is. I remember when I was in the military, when I was in the Army, I was really fit and obviously a bit more muscular and whatnot than I am now, but that weight was 217, because I remember it because we used to have to do weigh-ins all the time, and I was always right on the cusp because I've got quite heavy bone muscle structure. My legs are quite muscular and big, and so I was always, if you don't get in under the guidelines, you have to go to the second level of determining if you're overweight,
right,
or fat bastard, as we used to say.
Yeah.
And that involved a bit more measurement, like using calipers and stuff to see if your percentage body fat was in violation of the
body
system.
mass index, as they.
Yeah, in a rougher way of doing it, but they would use tape measure and calipers to check the fat thickness behind your biceps, or your triceps rather. And so all that would always put me in the clear, because I was not made up primarily of fat at that age. So anyway, my target weight's 217, and when I started this, I was 252 and a half, I believe. This is pounds, by the way. I don't know what that is in stone, but
40,
yeah, I got to divide it by 14 and figure it out. I don't know why that's so foreign to me, but it still is. I use stone when I know it's 14. I go, yeah, it's a stone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, went from 114 kilograms to 107, whatever it is now. So yeah, I'm kind of halfway to my 217. So I'm gonna stick with it. And like I say, I have no illusions that it's going to be as fast as the first 21 pounds or 14 pounds or whatever. But that by summertime, I should probably be close enough that I can.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you in a bikini.
Yeah, me too.
It's exciting. I think what we need to do is check back in with you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, okay.
See how you're looking.
Yeah,
see how you're feeling, more to the point.
No, absolutely.
Cool.
I'm feeling great. I can already testify to that. I don't think that'll change. I think I am fat adapted now. I think I'm properly into it. And every time I measure now, I'm at some level of ketosis. In the worst case, the worst reading I had was a morning after I'd eaten at my mother-in-law's, and I'd eaten some spicy Iranian pickle relish she makes that I believe has carbs in it because it's got carrots and other stuff in there. Right. It doesn't have sugar, but I think it raised my carb count over the limit for the day, and even that was a 0.8. So I was still in ketosis, although at the low end of it. But most readings, most days, I'm either like 1.5 or 2.1. I'm somewhere in that range. So I'm kind of in the optimum fat burning range. So good. I feel good about that. So yeah.
Very good. Well done, sir. Good.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes. Welcome.